I'll introduce myself. My name is Dylan Klepitar. I recognize some of the names here. Hi, Mary Rose. Hi, Mary. I may know others of you, and I thank you for your interest in this important topic. I want to start by saying that the information I'll present today is, it might be dense. I mean, the whole purpose of this presentation is to try to make this topic more approachable, because when I first got interested in this topic, it was very intimidating to me. So I thought that it might make good material for a workshop like this, because the whole idea here is to try to make this topic more approachable. So with that said, if you have questions as I'm going along, I might breeze by a detail that was new to me just 3 or 4 years ago. So please flag me or put the question in the chat immediately, and Francesca or Sarah will pick up on that and stop me and say, hey, we have a question. Because without that, we won't be able to build an understanding. So I'll try not to use any jargon or any technical terms, but if there's something I say that isn't clear to you, please stop me. And then for more general questions, maybe just hold on to those. We'll have plenty of time at the end. And I know some of you are interested in starting a project like this, or interested in at least getting the conversation going. So if you have a project specific question, we'll have plenty of time at the end to address those things, and you can ask questions specific to your project area. So I'll tell you a little bit about how this project started. My background is not in chemistry. It's certainly not in diesel. But I got interested in this topic because I've wanted to come up with more sustainable ways to power our farm. Right now, we don't have access to draft power. And short of that, we still use, even when we do use draft power, we're still using a tractor quite a bit. So it's incumbent on all of us to try to come up with ways that are less carbon intensive to grow food for people. So that was a main motivation for starting this project. I'll also say that we're a very small farm. We're only farming about 150 acres right now. And with our 15 head of cattle and about the same in pork, we're still generating a lot of fat that we end up throwing away. We use some lard to make popcorn here and there, but the amount of tallow and lard that we threw out was pretty incredible to me. And so to put all that work into raising the animal and only recover the meat from the carcass seemed a little wasteful. So we make soap, we do all these things, but there's still always an abundance of fat that seems like it's headed to the compost. So those were some of the main motivations of starting this project. And like I said, I started this about 3 years ago and didn't have a clue. Didn't really have a clue about it. I knew that you could make energy from fat. That's what fat is essentially. And going on that premise, I started doing research and found out that animal fats, you could make diesel out of them. You could make biodiesel out of them. So that was really intriguing to me. And as I did more research, I actually found out that the diesel engine was created to be a farm powered machine. That is, farmers could grow the fuel for the diesel engine. And that was the primary motivation for the diesel engine. And I didn't know that when I started. So I found that quite fascinating. Actually, Rudolf Diesel, who holds the patent for the diesel engine, presented at the 1900 World Fair, and the first diesel engine was run on peanut oil. In Germany at that time, there was a lot of peanuts being grown. And so he wanted to create an engine that farmers could grow their own fuel for. They quickly realized that in distilling gasoline, one of the byproducts is a very similar petroleum-based fuel. And so that became the replacement for all diesels, virtually all diesels today. So home heating oil, obviously any ambulatory use for fuel like tractors and vehicles and semis, all that diesel is coming from petroleum. That's starting to change, and this project represents one of hundreds of projects across the country and across the world that are trying to replace that diesel fuel as we transition to more sustainable sources. So that's a little bit about the motivation and the background. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So I wanted to basically start with some of the things that I learned first in doing this project. And that is that basically that the fat that I wanted to use to create biodiesel, which is lard and tallow, lard from pigs and tallow from beef cows, contains what are called fatty acid methyl esters, or FAME is the acronym for that. And through a process called trans-esterification, a lot of big words to basically say that you want to take the energy out of this fat. And so the process of making biodiesel is from this fat is basically removing the energy components and separating the energy components from the soap. So many of you have probably experimented or heard of people making lard soap and tallow soap. There is a lot of components that can be saponified in fat. So biodiesel is the process of isolating the energy components and the soap components. So you'll see that by the end of this presentation that glycerin is actually a byproduct of making biodiesel, which I'll get into that a little bit later. But the process of making biodiesel is trans-esterification, and like I said, it's to pull out the energy components of the fatty acids contained in energy in fat. So what I want to do is to share a 4-minute video that we made that just goes through the basic process of making biodiesel, and I'll mute the video and I'll narrate it so that I can help walk you through the various steps as we go. So just give me a minute here. I'm gonna share my screen and then we'll start the video. Can everyone see my screen? Maybe Francesca or Sarah could confirm.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna start this video. This video is downloaded, so I hope it appears cleanly to everyone. This is on my desktop. These are some pigs we have in the woods. This is just one of our pig groups, but these are all Gloucester old spots, and they put on quite a bit of fat by the time we reach slaughter. There's me dumping tallow and lard into the grinder over at a nearby butcher shop. And this is what comes out. I'll pause this here. It's probably disgusting. Hopefully you're all keeping your lunch down, but you know, off of one pig, we might get 60 pounds of excess fat. So we brought basically a few slaughters worth of fat into the butcher shop one day and began grinding it. And so this is what the ground fat looks like when we're done. In front of you is a kettle that we fashioned, and that is before making biodiesel, before starting the chemical process, you need to render the fat down just like you would if you were making lard or rendering tallow. And so the grinding is to get more surface area on the heating elements. And then this large kettle is one that we fabricated with a little machine shop in Indiana. And so this is me filling the jacket of the kettle with water. And we're gonna add that. We're gonna add all that ground fat into there. So here's us, me and a couple pals, adding that fat that we just ground at the butcher shop into the kettle. I installed a mixing paddle on my kettle, and we'll get into the equipment a little bit later about why you might want that or why you might not. But this was just to expedite the process of rendering. Now, in order to create that reaction I talked about earlier, the trans-esterification, you need a alcohol and a catalyst. And so the catalyst we're using to conduct this reaction is potassium hydroxide, which is abbreviated here as KOH. And so there's there's some footage of me looking like a mad scientist in my shop, making one of our first batches of biodiesel. So the preparation of the ingredients has to be very exact. And so I'm measuring out the potassium hydroxide there. Again, I will go over the equipment that's specifically being used here, but this is basically a pump that I use to be able to pump the oil into the reactor. The reactor is what I use to actually create the reaction. But as you might have noticed in that first clip, there's a lot of fat that's mixed in with meat. And so I created a bypass so that I could easily take off the meat from the fat, because we really just want that melted rendered fat. So this is me pulling off the bottom of the excuse me, the bottom of the kettle. It's a lot of fat. It's a lot of fat oil is what it is. Here we're just testing, make sure our pump is going to work. It looks great. This is a, whoops, I want to slow this down a little bit. After the fat's been rendered and filtered, it's time to add it to our reactor. Again, I will get into the actual equipment that's featured here, but after it's rendered and settled and filtered, we're transferring it into the reactor, which is where we'll actually add those chemicals and create a reaction. So you can see it's being pumped in there quite rapidly. Here I am adding those pre-metered ingredients into the reactor. I'm donning safety equipment. I don't use all that safety equipment anymore. And here you see the methanol being added. I said we need an alcohol and a catalyst. So we're using methanol in this instance. And I'm looking very intently at a sight glass that I put on the reactor so I could tell when it was at the right level. It's not a very exciting video shot, but it is an important part of the process here. And you have to add the reactor that I have in my setup. I have to add alcohol in 2 different places because there's actually a pre-reaction that happens. You need not concern yourself with those details, because depending on what equipment you have, it will blend those ingredients automatically, both in sequence and in quantity. So it'll be added when it needs to be added to the fat, and it will also be metered when it's added based on the machine's pre-programming. So I'll pause it here for a quick second. So the first reaction is the reaction that I first alluded to, where we're going to split the diesel, which is the energy component of the fat, and the glycerin. So after 24 hours, that reaction has caused the glycerin to separate from the diesel. And here I am draining it off of the bottom. Glycerin is more dense than diesel, and so it sinks to the bottom. And you can see that this glycerin is just beautiful. It's incredible to make soap with. I'll show you guys a little bit later the beautiful soap that this glycerin makes. But this is an important part of the process because we don't need glycerin in our tractor. We just need the diesel. And so we're taking that off the bottom of the reactor. And so when I started to see diesel come out into my hose there, I shut the ball valve because I knew that I had gotten all the glycerin out. The diesel at this point is every bit fuel. It's just got contaminants, leftover catalyst from the reaction, and also a little bit of glycerin probably somewhere in there. So you need to wash the diesel. That's the major second step is to actually put warm water through the diesel and agitate it so that when you put it in your tractor, it's clean fuel. So again, the machine does this on an automatic basis. You just need to give it a supply of water, and it will pull in water and agitate automatically. That's a little ACV that I'm adding, apple cider vinegar. That helps complete the cleaning process. It helps with the agitation, and it helps get the grease off of the diesel. So there's the in water, and the first shot was what's coming out of the reactor, the impurities and such. Again, the machine is doing a lot of the work automatically. It's agitating the fuel. And that's that. So I do obviously want to pause. That was a great deal of information, but I just wanted to try to condense the process to start with, and then sort of branch out in each department of the process and talk more about the equipment and things like that. But are there any questions right now that we should address? How much glycerin is produced each run? Great question. So are you guys, I stopped sharing my screen. You're looking at my shop now, aren't you? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna zoom you over to this reactor here. This specific unit here it's called a BioPro 190, and this is a very specialized piece of equipment. It can be programmed to do different things, but the way that I've programmed it is to run a batch of fat that is 50 gallons of fat, basically. And so from 50 gallons of fat, 50 gallons of rendered fat, I should say, I'm pulling off 12 gallons roughly of glycerin and about 42 gallons of diesel fuel. So to get 50 gallons, excuse me, of come back over here. Hopefully you guys aren't getting motion sick. To get 50 gallons of fat, it's about 450 pounds of meat-laden lard and tallow. So it's quite a bit of fat, but we were also throwing out quite a bit of fat. So we've had a steady supply coming from us, from our neighborhood of producers. There was one more question in the chat. Let me see if I can pull it up. Do you use beef and pork because that's what you have, or do you need that mix for the best biodiesel? Great question. We use beef and pork fat because that is what we have. But like when I kill a deer during hunting season, I also save that fat and I'll put that in. We raise, a dozen sheep every year. We keep all their tallow also, if that's what it's called. Mary Rose will correct me if I'm wrong on that, but we save all the fat we have, any fat we have from any animal, even the grease, bacon grease from the stove. We're saving that and putting that in. So almost every batch is unique in terms of what feedstock we use. That's what the source is called, is a feedstock. And almost every batch is different. And we've even had people say, oh, well, I heard you can make biodiesel from used vegetable oil from restaurants. And so people have brought us used vegetable oil too on occasion, and we'll mix that in. It makes no difference for the quality of the diesel. It will change the gel point slightly, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. But those are really great questions. So I want to just talk a little bit about the equipment that I have behind me and how all this came to be, because many of you are probably wondering, well, how feasible is this? And the first thing I'll say is, you or someone on your team or someone you know well should have some experience in the trades. Electrical and plumbing are very important for this project. There is, of course, the option of working with a really willing contractor to help you install these pieces of equipment. In our case, it probably would have blown the budget, but you know, there's a lot of tweaks you can make. This is just one outline of an installation, and the basic footprint is that you need about an 8x12 space, ideally somewhere where you can take over. It shouldn't be in the way of anything else in your operation. I think some of my employees sometimes wish that I wasn't making biodiesel on the days I am if we need to work on a tractor or something, because it does take up a considerable amount of space. But you basically need ventilation. You can see above me, I have this hood vent. There's nothing really toxic about rendering, but it's pretty porky in our case when we're making diesel. And so I have that to pull air out. You need some fuel source. It can be electric. Mine is electric, but you need some energy component for your kettle, you know, some way to melt the diesel, or excuse me, melt the fat down. And then you can either make a reactor or you can buy one, like we have here. We were in a position where we were able to get funding through NYSERDA, actually one of the conference sponsors, to pay for 75% of our project. And so we went ahead and spent about 10 grand on this reactor, which the return on investment is about 20 years. So we hope this piece of equipment lasts us 20 years. It's doing great right now. But you could also make a reactor. There's plans online of how to make your own biodiesel reactor. So you need a kettle, you need a reactor, you need ventilation. You also need plumbing, so drain plumbing and ideally hot, clean water supply. So that's kind of like the basic installation utilities that you would need. And the fact sheet that I've attached to this presentation actually has a detailed list of all the equipment and how much it costs and how long it would take to recoup each of these investments, because that's obviously a really important consideration for making diesel. Now, we've talked a little bit about the process, and I guess, you know, what I quickly get to is, well, what's the application for this fuel? How is it different than regular diesel? The first thing that's very different, and it's going to be very noticeable to farmers who you're working with on this project, is that it's more expensive to produce biodiesel. Based on the chemical additives and the amortization of this equipment, I'm making biodiesel right now for $5 a gallon. We don't sell biodiesel. I mean, we offer it to other farms who give us fat, and we technically can do that because we're just processing their fat. But if we were selling biodiesel, it would be about $5 a gallon. And I'm working with a group of Cornell chemical engineers, and I was really discouraged because I wanted to be competitive with petroleum diesel. And they said, don't worry about $5 a gallon because it costs about $11 a gallon to make a gallon of petroleum diesel. It's just that the subsidy is so significant that we pay $3.89 or whatever offer it is right now, $2.90. So while this diesel is more expensive, if more efforts to subsidize or help farmers pay for biodiesel or sustainable fuels happens, it will bring down the costs noticeably. But that's the first noticeable difference. It costs $5. So, you know, right there, I lose half the people. They're just like, it's more expensive. And for us at this particular farm, sustainability is a core value. And so when we're thinking about the inhabitability of the planet in 50 years and how much food we can grow for people when there's erratic weather patterns and things like that, we think it's okay to spend $5 a gallon. This is what we need to do. But many farmers don't feel like that. So, you know, that's the first main difference. It's $5 a gallon. I would say the next difference is in the quality of the fuel, more its characteristics, I should say. So unlike regular petroleum diesel that gels at about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, the fuel that we're making gels or solidifies at about 50 degrees. So this is a seasonal fuel if you're running 100% biodiesel. You obviously don't want to be in a situation where you need your tractor to work and you filled your tractor with biodiesel and there's an unseasonably cold day and one of your injectors goes because it's pumping solid fuel. And I'll just give you an example of this right now. So this summer we distributed about 1,200 gallons of blended biodiesel, and I blended it at 50-50 so we could bring down that gel point. But this is some biodiesel. This is 100% biodiesel. You do not want to put this in your tractor. This is like lard. This is about as thick as lard. And so I left this outside overnight just so I could show you guys. This is what our biodiesel will look like at, it's probably 50 degrees now or close to it. This is that same biodiesel at room temperature. So this biodiesel is the same as this, identical. This is at 70 degrees and this is at 45 or 50 degrees. So there's some questions in the chat. I should probably address those. So just want to show you those are the two different diesels here. Just give me a minute, guys. Did you have to rebuild the engines? No. That's a great question. So I modified our tractor to run on biodiesel, but only because I wanted to use 100%. Most of the farmers I'm working with want to burn 50-50 so that they don't have to worry about the fuel gelling up. And even though manufacturers have said, don't burn more than 5% or 10% biodiesel, the biodiesel we're making is of outstanding quality. We're not just like hobbyists tinkering with this. This is like really something we're committed to, and the biodiesel works great. In fact, it has better lubricity than regular petroleum diesel. And so, it has the potential to extend engine life, but it burns every bit as good in tractors. And this fuel is now in modern common rail engines. It's in telehandlers and big 200 horsepower case tractors and haymaking equipment. We put it in hundreds of engines at this point, and to no ill effect that we can discern. And we've also talked to mechanics who assure us that there's some sort of cooperation between the manufacturers and oil companies. I'm not like a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it makes sense, but they're working together to say, let's control the amount of biodiesel that people are thinking are confident to put in their engines. There's certainly downsides. The gelling thing is real. But if you do so carefully, watching the temperature and making your blends carefully, there should be no problem with using biodiesel in a regular tractor or any other machine. We use it in our gators, little garden tractors, pretty much anything. Internet's crashing. Okay, I think we're up to date. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone's questions. Great.
You're all caught up.
All right, cool. So I'll just
we just had another question come in from Laura.
Okay. Can you read it to me, or would you mind?
Sure. Yeah. It says, any difference in soot output with running biodiesel versus a regular?
Yes. A really good question too. So there's a lot less soot with the biodiesel we're blending and making here. There's much fewer emissions also. So I'll address the soot and the emissions separately. The soot is probably like 1/4 or less. We weren't able to measure it because the machines that measure it are really expensive, and the researchers we were working with couldn't get their hands on that equipment, and we couldn't send the fuel out to be tested. But we did do a life cycle analysis and measure emissions, and the emissions reductions, even considering the production process, were 97% lower as compared to petroleum diesel. So it virtually eliminates emissions on that standard if you're comparing it to petroleum diesel, because a lot of the emissions from petroleum diesel, I learned, are actually in the process of manufacturing, producing, refining, and transporting and distributing petroleum diesel. And so, you know, the fact that we're taking fat from our animals or nearby farms, bringing it to the butcher shop down the road, bringing it here, I mean, the sort of traveling footprint and the resource footprint of this biodiesel and the biodiesel you all might make would be very low comparatively. But there's also this human health component of soot. And so soot is very carcinogenic. And if we're transplanting behind the tractor or doing work where there's a lot of people working right around the tractor, it's noticeably cleaner. I mean, you can tell, but it's also not carrying as many carcinogenic compounds in soot. So it's also good for the operator and people working close to the tractor. It might make them hungry. Actually, that's an issue. It smells pretty much exactly like if you were grilling ribs on a barbecue. That's what it smells like when we're burning this biodiesel. And so no soot really to speak of, but I can get more precise measurements of that to you if you drop your email in the chat. Just want to show you some of the other blends I've made. So this, you'll notice this one's a little reddish. That's because I mixed it with off-road diesel. This is a B30 mix. This is a B50 mix. And the B just means how many parts of biodiesel per 100 is the mixture. So B50 is 50%, B30 is 30% biodiesel. When I say B100, I mean 100% biodiesel, just straight up biodiesel. So we've gone over the costs. We've also gone over the usage of this fuel, its gel point, its lubricity, things like that. So, with usage, the trick is just use it at the right time. And for us, we use our tractors mostly for summer activities, haymaking or feeding out animals or, just brush hogging, whatever we're up to in the summer. So it works out okay that we're not burning biodiesel year round, because we use most of our diesel in the summertime anyhow. So, this gel point issue is real, but most of our tractor work is happening when the temperature outside is above 50 degrees. And so we feel like we can be pretty cavalier with using biodiesel blends up to 80% most of the summer. But as I said, most of the farms that we're working with want a 50% blend because it combines, a more economical price with not as many risks of the fuel gelling in the injection system. And so that's the blend that we're putting out in the world. And I can talk a little bit more about how I blend it at the end of the presentation if you all are interested in that. Other drawbacks are that, a potential benefit and drawback is that biodiesel has an astringent property. It's very cleansing. And so the first couple of times that people will use biodiesel in the tractor, I'll get to that question, that's a good one. A lot of times people will put biodiesel in their tractor and it cleans the tank. It literally cleans all the gunk and stuff from however many years that tractor or that vehicle has been filled with regular diesel. And so what will happen is that the fuel filter will get clogged almost immediately when you put biodiesel in there, because it's pulling all those contaminants into the fuel system. So usually when a farmer switches to biodiesel, there's, maybe even immediately, but usually within the first couple of weeks, they'll have to swap out the fuel filter. So I always tell farmers, here's the deal, pick up a few fuel filters when you're at Napa, so that when you start running this fuel, you don't get surprised when you're making round bales or something, and your tractor can't be down even for 10 minutes. So you have it in your mind that you might prepare for that. The bonus is once that process is done, your fuel tank is really clean. And so there's less contaminants getting into your injection system over time. So how do I store biodiesel? So I store it in these blue barrels. Let me try to show you. I just store them in regular blue barrels like that. We have about 1,000 gallons, maybe less than that, maybe like 800 gallons put up right now because we're not burning biodiesel, we're just making it right now. And so we're just storing it in blue barrels. And we add a little bit of an enzyme that kills bacteria that would grow. Because that was something I learned, that biodiesel being made from organic substances can grow bacteria. But it stores for 8-12 months. That's about the same lifespan as regular diesel has. But I've also learned that because we're using virgin feedstocks, that is, this fat has never been used for anything else. It doesn't really present a bacterial contamination risk. It's more that when people use used vegetable oil to make biodiesel, that they run into problems with bacteria because it's been used before. But in terms of storage, I just put them in these blue barrels. You could also use IBC totes. You could use steel barrels. Or it may be the case that you're burning so much that when you're done with it in the reactor, you're just pumping it right into your tank. So we only have this storage thing seasonally. Most of the diesel that we make in the summertime is going right out the door and into the tractors. So let's see, cost, tractor maintenance. The gelling is an issue, the cost. Yeah, so those are some of the main considerations when using the finished product of biodiesel. Drawbacks, benefits, all those things. Obviously, the motivations for this project were environmental primarily, and just closing the loop on a lot of that food waste. And so on all those, it scores really well. But on some of the more, I guess, tangible or immediate drawbacks, cost, a little bit of extra maintenance with those couple filters and things like that. That's sometimes enough of a barrier that many people are intimidated by that. The cost and the extra consideration. So in fairness, I just wanted to, let you guys know some of the feedback I've gotten is some farmers are just like, you know what, I'm fine with my regular fuel filter interval. I just don't want to do another one. It takes 5 minutes, but that's not for everyone. So, I have to be, fully transparent about that. But I also did want to mention that tractors and off-road vehicles aren't the only place where biodiesel can be used. So we've started burning biodiesel in our furnace, and that creates all the hot water for our domestic use. And I have ambitions, I don't know if it'll happen or not, of heating our greenhouse with biodiesel instead of oil. So there's lots of places on the farm where you can use this fuel if it's important to your customers, or it's important to you to use energy that you created, or at least 50% of the energy you created. So tractors aren't the only place where this fuel can go. So I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about the equipment with you all and what I've set up here. I'm going to try to stroll the computer around, and I've already mentioned there's a lot of alternatives, but I just want to kind of show you what's comprised of each of these things. So we start at the butcher shop, and I explained to you that the fuel or the fat that we're using has to be ground. So that's something we do at a nearby butcher shop. But if you have a grinder at your farm, or you wanted to have that process on your farm, you would also need to have a grinder here. But once you're here, you're at the kettle stage. So this is the kettle we use. It's a 85-gallon electric powered jacketed kettle. This piece of equipment we had made, like I said, in Indiana. But there's propane powered kettles, or there's also like restaurant supply type of equipment that would work for this. All that stuff was so expensive that I just opted to have this unit made. And then this pump and bypass system down here, this is just of my own making because I didn't feel like scooping hot oil into my reactor. So a lot of experimentation, but that's what I'm here for is to, make sure you guys don't have to work out the kinks that I did. I tried a lot of different pumps. Some of them couldn't handle hot oil. Some of them, the oil was too viscous. Some of it had bad plumbing connections and I couldn't really make my bypass. But all the oil comes out of the bottom of this kettle. I hope you all can see that. I know it's a weird angle, but the oil comes out the bottom. And so all that meat that settles, I have to get that off somehow. So you see this valve I have here, and that's to get that meaty part of the rendered fat off. So that's the kettle there. I've got banjo fittings on everything here. Some of you probably use banjo fittings at your farms, or have seen banjo fittings. I put them everywhere just so everything's really quick to disconnect and clean. Over here, I have the BioPro, which is, it's a big engineered piece of equipment. This is a stainless box basically, and then the brains of it are all up here. Inside of this top compartment is all the electrical components, and inside there is timers that dictate when each pump comes on, when each paddle mixer comes on. Like I said, it automates the ingredients, when they're added, how much, and then it mixes and heats. It also heats the feedstock when that needs to happen. So once it's in here, there's a few steps, as you saw in the video, but a lot of this process is fairly automated. And then out of here, I've connected a fuel filter to my little pump here, but this is my gas pump. I just bring a barrel over here, or I bring the tractor in the shop, and I fuel up from here instead of going to our bulk tank on the side of the road. So, and behind there, you can see I have a hot and cold supply line coming into there. That's for the washing of the diesel. I think that's really all. I mean, this took probably a year to put together because I was farming while I was doing it. But if this was your full-time job, or you hired a contractor to install this equipment and the electrical supply and the plumbing supply and things like that, you might be able to finish it in a month or two, if you already had the space set aside. So I want to leave lots of room for not just questions about the material I've presented on, but also to hear some of you about why you're here, like why this presentation is relevant to you and how you see the information that you might take from it valuable to your farmer or your community if you're plotting to try to do something like this. I realize some of you might just be interested in it, or maybe you just want to use biodiesel in your tractor instead. So I'd like to hear about some of the projects people are thinking about, and then I can kind of take a deep dive with you and talk about what it might take or how your project might look a little bit different than this one. So fire away. Oh, we lost Mary Rose. Shoot.
This is just also fascinating to me. I mean, you're taking what I think as livestock producers we all struggle with and turning it into like a viable product that's like beneficial. I'm just super impressed.
Yeah, me too. I mean, a lot of this is like, I had a great team for this, so I want to defer all the credit. I worked with really smart people in the engineering department at Cornell. I worked with really talented technical advisors at NYSERDA. I talked to people in Gambia and Argentina and, all this stuff, because this is still an emerging technology. And my goal is to try to make the scale replicable. And so I spent way more money than you have to do this, because I had to buy stuff that didn't work and figure out why it didn't work, and really refine the formula. So I wanted to create an opportunity to pass that on, so that it doesn't take you all 3 years. It might take you 3 months or less. So yeah, it's amazing. And this is what Rudolf Diesel was inspired by. He wanted to make farmers a machine that they could power with what they're growing or raising on their farm. And so this might seem new, but it's actually 120 years old. Like this is how it started. We're just coming back to it, like so many things. And if we hadn't had all the modernization of diesel engines happening in the background, you might be able to just put regular lard in your tractor instead. It'd be a little gloppy, I realize, but it's just coming full circle. Yeah.
I have a question on the enzyme that you were talking about. You put in the barrels with the biodiesel. I don't know if there's numerous ones that you can use, or if it's just,
Yeah, you can use biodiesel. It's not reactive with plastic or metal. So, and I picked 55-gallon barrels because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm making 42-gallon batches. And so 42 gallons, fits in there nicely. And it still gives me a little room if I want to put some petroleum diesel in there and mix it up in the barrels. And it's also nice because I can heat up the diesel I've made. When I blend it, I want it hot, so I can just wrap a barrel heater around a metal barrel, and that brings the temperature up so I can work with it. But there's probably storage solutions that I haven't pursued here, just because I kind of have a system that works. But yeah, storage is a consideration, a safety consideration. You've got these ingredients that are toxic. You've got biodiesel, it's semi-flammable. It's not as flammable as regular diesel, but it's flammable for sure. I can show you guys some of the soap that we make. This is what a bar of glycerin soap makes. There's no scratch and sniff on Zoom, but it's really, really nice. It smells really elegant, actually. And it's just this incredible grease cutting soap that obviously is biodegradable, all that good stuff, but it's, you're going to have a lot of glycerin on your hands. And so finding some way to use it like this is really, really great. So even though it's considered a waste product of making biodiesel, this is, I would say, a premium byproduct. There's some stuff coming in the chat. Can you decode?
Laura Cook says, I'm just here because I'm fascinated by what you've done. It seems like there should be small regional biodiesel production facilities everywhere. What are the barriers to creating a small cooperative facility?
Wow, that's almost like a prepared comment. That was so well articulated. Thanks for the question. Yes, we should definitely have regional cooperatives. And that's the vision of this project, is to make a scale that's replicable and is community sized. So we can take in, every week we could take in about 1 ton of fat. And I can just tell you, based on our limited experience here, we're capturing like 1/100th of the capacity of fat that's in our area. Like all the slaughterhouses and butcher shops are sending either to the compost or one of these huge rendering facilities to make additives for Twinkies, all their fat. And it's a very low value product that they're making with it. And so the idea would be to make regional centers where that fat is aggregated. Maybe the facilities are even at slaughterhouses themselves, and that the distribution and input is all, regional, so that we're not getting our fuel from so far away. The barriers to that are, I think farmers are all crunched for time. This might be a great concept in theory, but I think it would need to be a farmer-led movement to do this, to partner with butcher shops to get these facilities built and to do what farmers in some places have where they have fuel cooperatives. So that would be an interesting next step. And it's just going to take us to do it. I don't think that slaughterhouses are intrinsically interested. I really don't think anyone else is as interested and dedicated as farmers would be. So it needs to be us who do that. And it's something I'm working towards slowly here in the Adirondacks where our farm is. But right now I'm just coming up against the fact that slaughterhouses are already like understaffed. And when you talk to the floor manager on the cut floor, and they're like, can you set aside all the fat and put it in barrels and I'll be there Friday? They're like, no, like you're kidding me. You know, they just don't want to hear that there's going to be extra work. So we need to blunt that reaction, and probably farmers can figure out a way to support it so that it can be financially feasible for the slaughter facilities and butcher shops. But we've had others who are really receptive. They're like, great, we were paying to get rid of it at a composting facility. Sure, you can have it. And the most I've done is really buy people barrels, but not people, businesses barrels to move the fat back and forth. And many of the farmers I work with are bringing beef or pork pigs to the slaughterhouse. So they're coming back empty all the time. So they don't mind bringing back the extra fat. But the genesis of this idea would be to put regional biodiesel co-ops together that are farmer run, contributed with fat that farmers grow, and then they would get a discount on their fuel, and away we go. Because people are talking about electrifying tractors, which is all good and well, but we have a lot of machines that are perfectly great if we can just find a more sustainable fuel source for them. So I hope that happens. And Laura, maybe you can help in your community. I'm happy to be a resource for you if that's something that you'd like to pursue.
I was going to ask a question actually.
Hi, Mary.
To what you just said. Hi, Dylan. I was wondering, I think you have solar panels, and I know that you're super committed to doing everything environmentally friendly as possible. And I was wondering what made you interested in this project rather than maybe, getting more solar panels or putting in geothermal heating for your greenhouses or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I think throwing all that fat away was the experience that first triggered me to be like, what? Like, can't this be used for something? And, I just thought it was energy. And liquid fuel is really great because it can travel, really easily. For our electrical needs or things at the farm, I feel like we're not like anywhere close to sustainable farming, but we're getting there. And for me, it just felt like, okay, this is a major blemish on our environmental record. It's just burning 1,200 gallons of petroleum fuel every year in our tractors to grow food for people. So I think it just rubbed me the wrong way that we were throwing all that fat out. But this might be like a thing where I just like get fixated on one project and try to make it replicable. Because I'm just kind of, I don't know, I'm really into that stuff. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful opportunity that I've had to do this. And so hopefully it can help other people get it off the ground. Your question reminded me, Mary, though, that I need to talk about, we can say this is a sustainable fuel. It does reduce emissions by 97%, but like sitting behind me is hydrochloric acid, and sitting behind me is methanol and potassium hydroxide, or some people use lye, sodium hydroxide. So these ingredients are dependent on the global supply chain. And some of them are, sustainable in their own right because they're byproducts of other things. But that's, a lot of the environmental impact, that 3% of emissions and things is from that. This is a globally dependent local process, like many of our farms. Our food is local, but the engine for our tractor is in India, and all this stuff is coming in. So I think the next frontier for biodiesel is how to make biodiesel from ethanol, which we can make here, and wood ash. So wood ash can be substituted as the catalyst instead of potassium hydroxide, and ethanol from something we can make here would substitute for the methanol. So I think that's your question reminded me that there's still a lot of work to do even within this project to make it more local and more sustainable. So those are some ideas I'd like to work on in the next few years. They're not ready for prime time, but they're things that I'd like to work on some more. Is anyone here thinking about trying to start something like this, or is this like an idea that you might bring to your fellow farmers? And what are some questions or reservations you think they might have?
I had honestly been really struggling with the amount of fat. So we have a dairy primarily, but we also do some livestock. And just the amount of fat that we throw out. And I've tried everything. I've made candles. I've, made soap. Like it's crazy. And I find this idea so attractive. It sounds like it is a whole nother enterprise to add to a farm. But thinking through, like, what could a small cooperative facility look like? It seems like there are potentially a lot of really good solutions, and with enough creative people like you doing the work and being willing to share, I don't know, it just seems really cool, and not something I would have thought about otherwise, but something I'm really glad that I've learned about.
Yeah. It is exciting. I'm glad that you were thinking the same thing I was thinking when we were throwing away this fat. Like, there's got to be something, especially with our dairy cows, because we slaughter a few dairy cows every year that we just retire or whatever. And there's a lot of fat on a dairy cow, a lot of yellow tallow, and it doesn't make the best cooking oil, frankly. It has a really gamey flavor to me. I like marbled meat, but I don't want like that much tallow. So yeah, there's a huge opportunity, and most farmers aren't even seeing their fat, right? Like, most of us send our animals to a USDA slaughter facility. That's the last, we don't even see how much is being thrown out. So the fact that you actually have seen it, those are some of the same experiences that motivated me. And I was doing the same stuff. I was like, how many candles can we make? And all this stuff. So yeah, I think if it was led by farmers who are more in touch with that, the volume of fat that we're throwing away, because ultimately it's farmers' work. It's all the time they spend haying and pasturing and feeding grain in the barn that makes that fat. So it's really like recuperating some of the calories the humans are burning to try to raise these animals that we can get back. So yeah, you're right on the money.
John 5 in the comments wrote, Organic Valley runs all their vehicles on biofuel in Southwest Wisconsin. I don't know if he's still on the line, but I guess I'd love to know more about how Organic Valley manages that.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the kind of leadership that's really great, because a big organization like that, I think, can take a risk, and they might probably have someone who's like dedicated to their fleet. And most of us, I shouldn't assume that you're all small to medium sized farms, but most NOFA members are. So it would only be those bigger operations who have like a fleet manager and things like that who could oversee a project like that. So I'm so glad that big operations and co-ops are taking that on. I wonder what they make their biodiesel from. Like, I've heard projects popping up across the country, like Sierra Nevada runs their tractor. They have a couple of tractors and a lift maybe and on biodiesel, and that's from their restaurant. They take the used cooking oil and make biodiesel. So there's a lot of different avenues, but as farmers, I think, there's farmers in Vermont who grow seed and make oil and then put it in their tractors. But to me, that wasn't very attractive, because this is already something we're producing and it's just getting wasted. So I was like, let's start there before I grow a field of sunflowers to put in my tractor. I just wanted to see if we could use this fat, and the answer is yes, we can, which is a really beautiful
Awesome.
thing. Yeah, it's cool.
Laura asks, what's the best way to keep up with your project's developments?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I need to work on that a bit, but we do have a URL that Cornell University is hosting for us. We just need someone from within Cornell to take it over. But up there you can find like the commodities I'm using, the price, all my formulas for making diesel and calculating the return on investment. And that URL is actually in the fact sheet, which is a PDF attachment to this agenda. So if you go over to the agenda and navigate to the presentation materials, you should be able to click on that PDF. You'll get all the information that I've presented on, but there'll also be a URL at the bottom. And that will become a good place to keep track of this project as it grows. And, I would love for that to be a place to catalog success stories if other people get this technology up and running, to showcase those stories, because those could be really motivating to other people if we show folks that it can be done. And there's a lot that I'm still learning, so that would be a good place to post it there as I start working out, working with farmers more here and maybe training some of them to make biodiesel instead of me, which would be really cool. So yeah, I'll try to post everything there and you can follow along. I also did make, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just also remembered that I put a video up on YouTube that's also, I don't know if I attached it to the agenda for this meeting, but if you go to the YouTube channel that the other video is on, you'll be able to see the one that reviews the mechanical side of burning biodiesel. Because we made a video about that too. So if you want something to show or share with people, there's a couple of videos up on YouTube.
And I just dropped in the chat the link at the bottom of the fact sheet.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so helpful.
So. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, for sharing your shop space. Like, this was awesome getting to actually see the machines. And a huge plug for banjo fittings. Those are life-changing. Once you get them on your farm, you never go back.
Oh my gosh.
So easy, so good. But seriously, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing the video and your resources. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all. I know we're ending a few minutes early, but thank you all for showing up and being passionate and interested. You've been a great audience. I know we were small, but this presentation is recorded, so I think other people will benefit from the content and the questions you all asked. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.